Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in just a few moments. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join. Okay, so I think maybe we will get started. It's just a few minutes after 10, and more people will be joining, I think, as we proceed. But good morning and welcome everybody to this edition of Industry Talks. Industry Talks is a bi-monthly webinar series where we invite professionals working in industry to speak on a topic related to software engineering and AI. And I think most of you know me already. My name is Lori Akiyama. I'm the program coordinator for CREATE SE4AI here at Concordia University in Montreal. And I apologize in advance for my voice. I'm recovering from a bout of laryngitis, so my voice is a little shaky, but I think I should be able to get through the webinar today. So today we are very pleased to welcome Patrick Mesana as our guest speaker. Patrick began his career as a software engineer, gaining experience with consulting companies and startups before transitioning into the field of data science. Patrick was a former manager in the data office of National Bank of Canada, where he encountered numerous data management challenges. Patrick is currently pursuing a PhD in decision science while serving as a researcher and scientific lead on these topics for the AI Factory at National Bank. Patrick will be speaking on the topic of balancing data valorization and privacy, industry challenges and opportunities. And the discussion around data privacy in organizations is very timely, so we are really fortunate to be able to learn from Patrick's expertise on this important topic today. And as usual, the webinar is being recorded and it will be available to view on our CREATE website at se4ai.org and on our YouTube channel. I'll ask that you please keep yourselves on mute until the Q&A session at the end, and then feel free to please raise your hand in the chat with any questions. So with that brief introduction, I'm pleased to turn things over to Patrick. And Patrick, the floor is yours.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Lori. Let me share my screen. Can you all see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm, like Lori said, I'm here to talk to you about current challenges, upcoming challenges, and potential solutions in balancing data valorization and privacy. I was, oops, what's going on? Oh, there you go. I was gonna introduce myself, but I think Lori did a better job than I was going to do. So I might skip that. I just want to say that although I work for the bank today as a researcher on analyzation, data synthesis, privacy, the views that I will present in this webinar are my own. I don't represent the bank, but of course, I'll try to, many of the things I will say will come from my experience at the bank. So what I've planned for you today is first an intro to data management, a field that I discovered at the bank. We'll talk about current challenges, but also the new challenges in data management, specifically the one related to privacy. And in the third part, we'll discuss what is privacy science and why privacy is a complex subject. And in the end, I'll give you 3 recommendations that I believe are important for current leaders in data and analytics. So what is data management? So the essential idea behind data management is that data is an asset. And you may have heard that data is the new oil. And although it's a good analogy to explain that data is a valuable asset, it's not necessarily the best analogy to take decisions on data and to manage data. So like oil, you can collect and you can store data. You need to refine it. So if there is many data scientists in this webinar, you probably did a lot of data preparation before you bring any value with data. So you can make that analogy. And organization, they can buy and sell data. They can buy data and sell data in data marketplaces, and they can also exchange data as a B2B transaction. Unlike oil, though, data costs almost nothing to store. It costs almost nothing to copy, to transform, to share. So that's already a big difference. Data is non-rivalrous, meaning that if an organization consumes data, it doesn't mean that another organization cannot consume the same data. It's renewable in the sense that with information, you can create new information. So that's very specific to data, to information. And ownership is often distributed. So I mean by that, that the organization that collects data is not necessarily the owner of that data. And you can interrupt me any time to ask questions, of course. Data valorization should be the top mission of any data-driven company. Something that we tell data experts, like I was told when I joined the bank, is you need to bring value with data, you need to create value with data. But sometimes what you don't understand is you're actually, with that process, increasing the value of data. And there's this very well-known graphic now from Gartner that is an analytics ladder that you can climb and increase the value of data this way, and increase value that you bring with data in an organization. And it starts with so you start with descriptive and diagnostic analytics, which are more associated with actually business, what was called before business intelligence, and it's more concerned with what happened, the performance, why do I have this cost? So all these questions that analysts keep today are trying to answer still today. And then if you move up, you're going toward optimization, and you're starting to use more predictive, more advanced models like predictive models. And ideally, you'll come to planning, feedback loops, and what we call prescriptive analytics. So of course, it's not easy to go up this ladder, and there are common data management challenges. There are typical challenges that an organization will face, like that are not necessarily specific to data management, like access. You often hear that your data experts, they don't have access to data, but they also don't have access to information or knowledge. There's lack sometimes of collaboration that is a typical problem in organizations. But then you have more specific challenges, and maybe you have heard this in the industry, that what you need is a data platform. So you need a data platform for your data user, whether it is a data fabric architecture or data mesh architecture, you implement it with a data lake or a data warehouse. You need to abstract to some degree software engineering so that your user can consume data more easily. And what often comes hand to hand with a data platform is good documentation, a catalog that is organized with domains that helps your data users navigate data. So that's often a challenge in the sense that it's not easy to build, and it's sometimes missing, and it's clearly stops you from going up the ladder. Then, of course, you have data quality problems, you have data governance. So data governance, historically, they were very concerned about data quality, but they also answers questions like who owns data, who has access, who should have access to data. So this is also very important in an organization today. And I'm not going to go through all the principles, but you often also have a practice and literacy problem that stops you from bringing value with data. So a typical model that you find in industry is the data office model. It's so we have a data office at the bank. So I'm not saying that this is the model of the bank. It's an abstract model that I'm just showing you to explain the concept of a data office. A data office is a set of dynamic capabilities and that try to answer all the challenges we just talked about. And I separated from the technological and data assets. So the data office, at the top of the data office, you have a chief data officer, and the chief data officer is not the owner of all the data assets. That's rarely how it's implemented. Often it's more federated model. So it's so the capabilities they govern and they evolve the data platform, the data catalog, but often it's the data owners are in the lines of business, and it's a federated model. And recently, the data office is also responsible to find the right balance between data valorization and privacy. So the topic of this talk, and I'm going to talk more about this now. Do you have any questions on this first part? Now we're going to move on to new challenges in data management and specifically privacy. No questions? All right. So I had a little bit of fun trying to explain what is privacy awareness. And so privacy awareness is how the society became more and more aware of the value of their data and privacy in general. And I took Mark Zuckerberg as like, I don't know if it's a reference, but to show that his own awareness and the perception that we have of his own awareness. So in 2003, Mark Zuckerberg created FaceMash, which was, I think, if I remember well, a way to rate the attractiveness of classmates that in the Harvard University. And he built that application hacking Harvard system. So I don't think we can say that he had a big awareness on privacy at the time. So that I put that at 0. And after FaceMash, he started Facebook, well, the Facebook at the time, and he didn't seem to have a particular attention to privacy, but he did acknowledge that some people probably wanted to have a private section of their profile, so he implemented that. In 2007, Facebook faced their first big privacy issues with a feature that allowed basically all your friends to see what you were buying online. So they were still I mean, it was not a big concern still, although they acknowledged some mistakes. And in around 2010, Mark Zuckerberg, he said that privacy is no longer a social norm. So he's often cited for that. And it's only, well, a bit more than 10 years ago. And what you can see now changing since 2010 is probably related to the fact that Europe announced that they were working on GDPR. So Facebook knew that they had to implement better control, and they did. But in 2017, there were this Cambridge Analytica incident that you probably heard of. And I think what's very revealing recently in 2021, when Apple announced their app tracking transparency framework, is the pushback that they had against that feature, because there's still, Facebook and Meta still have a model that is actually data maximization. So it's not really going into the right direction, but the awareness is definitely here now. They cannot really they had to change. The Facebook and Meta had to change, and I think it reflects well also to give a bit of credit to Mark Zuckerberg. Personally, 10 years ago, I was not aware of privacy as much as today. And that's really what the message I want to say on this slide. It's that we all increase our awareness about privacy. And something else also that helped us increase that awareness is the many data breaches that globally that happened. And here on the slide, you have the biggest data breaches in the financial industry. You can find also the Desjardins, which is the the concurrent of a national bank in Quebec. But it's not to say. I mean, it's a fact that there is a lot of data breaches in North America. Actually, most of them are in the US, and it's definitely increased our awareness and made realize to people the value of data. And just as a quick insight, the average cost in the US of a data breach is 9.44 million. So I think that organization now realize that it's a very big concern. And if they don't realize it, like I mentioned, now there are modern data privacy laws. So in 2018, Europe passed the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation. And I'm not going to go through all the principles of GDPR, but what you need to understand is what the big change is. It is opt-in consent regulation, meaning that you need to ask for consent before you collect data. It seems logical, right? But in fact, most regulations are still opt-out consent. So that means that organization can collect data, and then you need to ask them to remove data. So this is a big change in privacy laws, and this is also what is happening in Canada. So in 2021, so there is in Canada there's always a provincial law and a federal law, and la loi 25, it's the modern privacy law in Quebec, passed in 2021, and at the federal level, we are at the second reading of Bill C-27, and you may have heard of this bill because a lot of people talked about it recently because of the ADA, so the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act that is part of the bill. Yoshua Benjo was really talked a lot about this and pushed to accelerate this bill because of the recent developments of generative AI. One of the objectives of these privacy laws is also to simply define what is the personal information. We didn't really define it. And the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada defined personal information as data about an identifiable individual. It is an information that on its own or combined with other pieces of data can identify you as an individual. So really, I think an important information here is it's not necessarily direct identifiers. It's also pieces of information that can identify you when combined together. So like I said, in Quebec, the law passed in 2021, and there are some obligations that are coming into effect. So last year, every organization had to designate a privacy officer, and also had any organization has to have a way to deal with incidents like, for example, data breaches. This September, what the big thing is that you, as an individual, you'll be able to ask to remove your consent. So you have the right to remove your consent, and it's big because then the organization will have to either destroy it or anonymize personal information. And also, one thing that I think is interesting coming in September is that every organization will have to do a privacy risk assessment. So that's something that they will have to integrate in their privacy risk, in their risk management framework. Next year, there will be a requirement on data portability. So you're maybe familiar with that kind of requirement because services like Facebook or Google, they already provide a way to download all your information, and now it will be all organizations that will have to provide that kind of tool. So as people are starting to understand the value of their data, what I'm arguing is that there is a change in data ownership. So on the left, you have a centralized data custodianship system where you have people that trust a couple of institutions to manage their data. And on the right, you have a decentralized data sovereignty system that is, I believe, that will happen in the future, where you have people that can remove consent, port data from one institution to another. And then you have also new systems like the open banking system that is a work in progress in Canada, but that will certainly come in the next years, that will facilitate sharing information between fintech companies and institutions. So just a quick word on open banking. Before, when, for example, you were using a service like Wealthsimple or any other fintech application on your mobile or whatever, what they were doing is they were using sometimes scrapping tools to, or they were using the web interfaces of institutions to connect to your bank and get some information. And open banking will make that a lot more safer for people. For example, it will force banks to implement APIs so that fintech can connect to your bank's API. So that will definitely facilitate and secure sharing information. So my argument here is that all these changes will change the data ownership system, and you'll be more at the center. You'll have more control on your data than before. So then there is this other big challenge. That is the rise of AI, right? So why is it a challenge? Well, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So with AI, you have challenges regarding privacy, fairness, inclusion, robustness. So for example, in the way you collect data has an impact on AI, right? So you can have a data bias that leads to unfair decision making. For example, if your organization has a majority of baby boomers as clients, models that you train may have a bias and may be less accurate on future generations. So that's just one example of responsible AI that you need to keep in mind. And the big elephant in the room today is of course generative AI. Generative AI is maybe in the future the way that we access information. So on the left, and it could affect also, sorry, the way we ask questions inside an organization. So on the left, you have the current way where you have data experts using tools like Power BI, SQL, Python to access information stored in a database in the cloud, for example. And maybe in the future, it's not only data expert that will be able to ask questions. You'll have anyone being able to ask questions in natural language, and you'll have a large language model underlying that may have some information stored in the model, but also may be able to query the same database and kind of give you a more semantic answer that you could have had before. So generative AI may be in the future the new way to access information inside or outside an organization. And it raises many questions. I'm sure that you heard about it in the news. There is, in my point of view, two problems that are very easy to observe and understand when you use these generative AI services like ChatGPT. Well, the first problem is they can hallucinate. So in some cases, it's very bad, because when you hallucinate, when you want to have information, for example, on an individual, and it hallucinates, it can give you it can basically lie about that individual. And that's if you haven't read it, I recommend the Washington Post article on the left. So that's already a big concern. So hallucination is a big concern, and I'm not gonna talk I'm gonna let others debate on hallucination. The ones that the other one is almost at the other extreme. It's something that's actually more easy to measure, and we'll see how in the next slide, is unintentional memorization. So at the same time that you have these models that hallucinate, they can also reconstruct very, very precise information, and sometimes sensitive information. So unintentional memorization has been studied in the literature, and there's this very good article by Carlini in 2019 that shows that unintentional memorization is different than overfitting. So you can see on this graph that when so exposure represents unintentional memorization. It's a metric that can represent that. And you can see that when the model achieve a local optima on the testing loss, at the same time it peaked in terms of exposure. So if you only take this graph, you could say that it both generalize and memorize unintentionally. So that's a challenge. It's a big challenge that we don't have a lot of answers today. But when we come to privacy science, I'll give you some tips, some hints. And you may have heard also that Italy they banned ChatGPT also for privacy reasons and a lack of transparency. So privacy is not the only problem or the only challenge with these generative AI models, but it's definitely something that a lot of people understand, and that regulators will use to either ban or regulate faster than these models. Do you have any questions on that second part before I jump to privacy science and engineering? So more the solutions for handling privacy challenges. No, we're good. All right. So many organizations have turned to anonymization as a way to not be affected by privacy laws, because if you can anonymize data, you're not subject to the privacy laws anymore, because it's not considered as personal information anymore. But of course, it's not, anonymization is not as easy as a lot of people think. And in the Bill C-27, anonymize means to irreversibly and permanently modify personal information in accordance with generally accepted best practices to ensure that no individual can be identified from the information, whether directly or indirectly by any means. And one confusion that a lot of people make is that they sometimes, and I had a friend who I talked to him about what I was doing, what the work I was doing on anonymization, and he said that, oh, it's easy. You just have to remove a couple of fields in the database, and then it's anonymized. So that's not anonymized. That's not anonymization, because that would be just removing the direct identifiers. But according to the law, it's not enough. So it's something that it's not just my friend who believed that. It's it's actually a belief that had many organizations before, that it was not so complicated to anonymize data. And for example, in 2006, Netflix, they created this competition, this data science competition called the Netflix Prize. And they shared, they anonymized viewing history, and they published it so that many data scientists around the world could try to predict or recommend movies and find the best recommendation engine for Netflix. But a group of researchers, they managed to re-identify a couple of individuals in that database, in that anonymized database, using techniques, using, sorry, the EMDB database. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's another database of people commenting on movies and rating movies. And they managed, using that database, to re-identify many individuals in the Netflix anonymized data set. So the result of that was that Netflix, they canceled the price sequel. They had to, there were a lawsuit that they had to settle for $1 million. So they kind of learned the hard way that anonymization is not easy. And maybe you're not, don't understand what I mean by how can a researcher attack, or how can someone attack an anonymized data set? So let me try to explain it here. So imagine that you have a table that contains anonymized data, and you have an attacker on the left that tries to find individuals in that data set. So what the attacker can observe is what we call quasi-identifiers. So it doesn't have direct identifiers, but he has information like the sex, age, education, occupation, when put together, can be considered as an identifier. If he has information, the same information as quasi-identifiers, he can make what we call a linkage attack. And if he finds just one individual, then he managed to identify that person, if he knows that the person was in the data set. Now, if you use anonymization technique, the result often will be that he won't be able to find one individual. He'll be able to find what we call an equivalence class. So that means that now he needs to guess what is the line associated with the individual. If you manage to increase the size of that class, you reduce the risk of re-identification. So anonymization can reduce the risk, but it cannot give guarantee, because you never know what the attacker has as background information to attack the data set. So that's why it's hard. It's a hard problem. One way that's one way to obtain that irreversibility that the law is requiring now is to use randomness. So to explain that concept, let me show you an example where, imagine that I ask you a question, a very sensitive question, like, have you ever done something illegal? And instead of giving me your answer, what you'll do is you'll flip a coin. And if it heads, you'll tell me the truth. If it's tails, you will flip another coin. If it heads, you'll say no. If it's tails, you say no. If it heads, you say yes. So what it does is, so it creates some noise in the whole answers that I can gather on individuals. But what is interesting is that I can never really say if you tell me the truth or not. So you get that irreversibility through randomness. And that idea is very important because it gave birth to more robust definitions like differential privacy that I will not discuss today, but it's important to know that today there are more robust definitions than we had when, for example, Netflix created their challenge. Another approach is synthetic data. So I have a question for you. Can you say which images is synthetic and which images are real on that picture, on that slide? Sorry. Anyone can try to answer that?
Yours is real there, Patrick.
Okay.
No.
Good. You spotted me. That's good.
They all look a bit synthetic to me, to be honest.
All right. Well, they are all synthetic. You're right about that. Even mine is synthetic. Actually, I paid $70 to get that synthetic data. So yeah, it's quite impressive what you can create now. Maybe they all look synthetic to you, but I'm sure that a lot of people will get fooled by these images. And the thing is, they're just gonna make more progress on that type of generative models. So synthetic data, it's a new approach to tackle privacy challenges, because synthetic data is considered like fake data, not personal data. They do not talk about synthetic data yet in the law, but there's, by definition, if you manage to recreate synthetic data, fake data, you shouldn't. It should be considered as anonymized data. Or I mean, you should be. It should not be considered as personal information data. I'm not going to go into the details where synthetic data can go wrong. It's not a silver bullet, of course, but what I'm showing you on this slide is a prediction that Gartner made that in the future, that will use more and more synthetic data and less real data as data scientists and data users. My point of view is that, like I said 2 times in this presentation, there is no silver bullet. Like, what you need to really understand is that there is an inevitable trade-off, and this touches the research that I do in my PhD. Is you need to understand how you can optimize that trade-off. So again, no silver bullets, but organization, I think for the organization, still the best way to go is data minimization. And I'm not going to go through all the principles, but Anne Cavoukian in 2009, she developed this principle, the 7 principles, and it's very important to understand that in the future, you should not treat privacy as something like a second thought. It should really be integrated in your decision process. And if you use these principles, you'll be above the curve. So in conclusion, I have 3 recommendations. The first one is manage and value your data assets. So for me, an organization that is mature in managing data is an organization that already tries to value data, tries to see what is the value of data. Second, be aware of the change in data ownership. So in the future, people are going to be at the center and will have more control on their data. And they want more control. When you look at what's happening today with generative AI, ChatGPT, etc., they ask even more questions than today about how were used their personal information. And to tackle this problem, this is my third recommendation, organizations, they need to start thinking privacy by design. So yeah, that's it for me. I think almost close to 45 minutes. Thank you for listening, and don't hesitate if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Patrick. That was a great presentation. Very interesting. Lots of meat to take away from that one. I see 2 participants have raised their hands. How come I can't see who there? Oh, Imad, would you like to start?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Patrick. Super insightful. I really like this presentation. Maybe my question is more because we face this even here at Concordia. As you know, we're also dealing with the beautiful laws that are being passed. And one thing that we're struggling with, I would say, is the cost of all of this, right? So, this doesn't really, for a lack of a better word, contribute to the bottom line or, of either productivity or financials or whatever you want to call it. So often these regulations, these steps that you put in place are seen as high cost, but little return or very low return. So do you have any insights from an organizational point of view of how to offset these costs, or how to even, make it a little bit more appealing to the people who have to deal with this?
Yes, I see what you're saying, because the laws are the same for any type of organizations, whether it's a small, medium, or big organization like the bank. I'm a bit biased with that question, because I think that in the principles that I was talking about, Anne Cavoukian, I would say that yes, you can see it as a constraint, but you can also look at it from even a competitive advantage. And I think, like, for example, a company like Apple, they completely changed their business model towards having privacy by design principle at their core. And so I'm not answering your question, because I think it's a tough question. I think if you look at it this way, it will always be a constraint. But if you look at it as a way to gain even more trust and a competitive advantage, then you can see some value out of it. It's not just a constraint. So that's my answer. I'm sorry, it's not really. I'm not giving you tips to offset some costs. I mean, it's definitely. I'm not saying, for example, at the bank we have these privacy by design as core principles, and I see what you're saying. But yeah, that's my answer.
Maybe just thanks, Patrick. Maybe just I know it's not really an easy question because we don't really have an answer to it. Maybe what I just a quick follow-up is what I feel is that yes, there's organizations like Netflix, maybe to a large extent, even banks that are really, really good because data is a core part of their business. But there are a lot of other organizations that have to deal with these laws. And data is not our core business, right? So for us, you know, a student record, for example, is just to communicate grades or to accept an application, right? It's, you know, the education is our core business, the research is our core business. It's a completely different story. And so, you know, I'm seeing that it's very hard to even get people to comply because now, you know, if I want to buy a piece of software, I have to go through 1,000 different, you know, approvals because they want to make sure that software is not sharing personal data. So for me, I'm just seeing the cost of that. I have to go through all these approvals, but I don't really see any reward. And I think there's a lot of organizations that are potentially in that bucket, if you will, where data is not a core business, but it's seen as and I think it's going to be an important challenge to consider, right? To just make sure that adoption
I agree.
is there. And if there's no adoption, then you're as weak, you know, as strong as your weakest link, right? So
I agree. I think to maybe to try to answer a bit your question, I would say that organizations like small organizations, they will have to rethink collecting data. I think that before in my point of view, they collect too much data for their needs. They don't really use all the data they collect. So they will have to rethink, basically embracing the data minimization principle. So they have to rethink how they collect data. And there's ways that to collect information, not necessarily individual data, individual personal information, but for example, insights or statistics, like the techniques that I gave that is used in health a lot is randomized response. So you create surveys that have privacy by design techniques, and you only collect the insights. So yes, it forces to collect more often data sometimes, and it's a constraint for you can still as a constraint. But I do think that many organizations will have to rethink their data collection processes. Sorry, I don't have an easy answer.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Imad, and thank you, Patrick. Let's move on to Jasmine. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for this presentation. I really enjoyed it. My question maybe is a bit highly hypothetical, but I was wondering, so in the age of generative AI, how can those data privacy regulations and legislations affect the very fast-paced development of those generative AI tools, because they rely so much on a very large amount of data? So what if there is, like, hypothetically, a mass opt-out consent? What would be the impact of this? And how do we keep up with the legislations with this very fast-paced development?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think the problem with, for example, ChatGPT and OpenAI is they're not very transparent on what data they're using. So we don't even know if they use a lot of personal information. Like Italy, they banned OpenAI, ChatGPT not because they knew what personal information they were using, because they didn't know what personal information they were using. So it's hard to answer your question because we don't know if they need a lot of personal information. I don't think, I think like the the majority of the training set is not personal information, but then it will change. Like you said, like if what will happen if individuals start valuing even more their data and think that data that before they were putting public, now they understand that it has value and they will want to sell it, and it's like an opt-out, a bit of opt-out a phenomenon that happens. It's very interesting, and I think that's the answer to that is privacy science, is techniques like differential privacy and rethinking how you train models to not depend as much on individual information. And so we're just at the beginning of it. I don't have like a straight answer, but I would say that it's privacy science is going to become very big in the future.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jasmine. Moving on, Dr. Adams, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, great presentation. We liked it. So there's definitely a lot of things that we have to rethink. And I'm wondering, so traditionally speaking, like online companies, there was like this things like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that forced them to log all their transactions that happened for if there was a dispute and things like that. I wonder, is there any kind of legislation as well regarding like storage of like actual predictions of models in production, like, or is that just, will it fall under the current legislation?
I don't know. I know that I haven't really, to be honest, I haven't really looked. I know that the AI and Data Act that is part of C27 is more on the principles, and one thing that they talked about is anonymization of the data that is used to train models. But I don't know the answer to your question. I'm not very familiar with AI regulation yet. I'm more familiar with privacy regulation. So if there is personal information, if the result of the prediction of a model can still be private information, it can still be considered as personal information. If it is, it's subject to privacy laws. But I think your question is go beyond that, and that I'm not sure if there is specific laws on that.
Yeah, because especially because of course, like the predictions you make today might lead in, I don't know, in a couple of weeks to actually new training data for the next version of a model. So that's how it kind of enters as well. It's oriented.
Yeah, and also the techniques that are used in privacy science, they can be used also for intellectual property. So I think that, for example, what you're saying is that basically how can we track information when it goes through many models? Privacy techniques will help on tracking that as well. So, but I don't know if lawmakers are talking about this specifically. It seems like a bit early for that. From what I heard, but yeah, definitely, I think it should be watched.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thank you, Bram. So I think we have time for one more question. Diego, please go ahead.
Yes, so thank you, Patrick. Love the presentation. So one thing that stuck out to me when we were teaching the course on engineering AI systems is that most of these legislations, they have this principle in which you can only retain the smallest set of data that is required for your system to function, right? But in many ways, like as an engineer, we don't actually know what is the data that we need to get to an optimal solution, and systems change, right? So sometimes you think about a new feature that requires new data, but you didn't collect that historically, so you can't even evaluate the effectiveness on that. So my question is, what can you share with us in your experience or solutions for this problem, which is kind of a chicken in the egg, somewhat problem for collecting or retaining data? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think today I spoke a lot about analytics, and what you're asking also is like, more on the operational side, and it's a very I think the one very promising approach is homomorphic encryption. So if you don't need to really use and do analytics on data, you have ways to encrypt the data in a way that you can still compute some things and process encrypted data. And so I would say that techniques like encryption, homomorphic encryption, for operational purposes, they're very promising. I don't know if it answers your question. It's really the question that you should ask is, yeah, data minimization, you're right. It's a constraint, but if it's for operational purposes, you may have solutions in the more security research field, like homomorphic encryption. So that would be one thing I would look at. Yeah.
So on this solution, you sort of preserve the relationships of the data, but kind of anonymizing them and breaking like the privacy implications of them. Okay, I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. So I think we're almost out of time here, unless anyone has a very quick last question. But I really feel like this is a topic that we should explore further, given the relevancy of the topic and the pace of technology and regulatory change that's happening right now.
Yeah. I just want to point out that I guess that there was no synthetic, okay, there's no real images, not because I knew it, but rather you were so careful with your slides and what you put in it that I thought if you had actually used real people, you had to buy them from like images and stuff. So I thought it's actually more like these are synthetic images, but they all look real. Yeah.
You're right. You're right. Good point.
Yeah, that was shocking to me too. I thought at least half of them were real and half were fake. Very convincing. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. That was a really excellent talk. I think everyone really enjoyed it and got a lot of value from it. So again, we really appreciate you being with us this morning and sharing your insights.
Thank you for inviting me. It was fun talking to you guys.
Great to have you. And thanks to everyone for joining. We had a lot of our CREATE trainees and co-PIs, as well as some of our partners and friends from National Bank. So appreciate all of you being here. And hopefully you can join us at our next trainee talks or industry talks webinar. I'll be sending the link around as soon as I upload the video to YouTube. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.